I am not done with the Twin Peaks Fire Walk with Me analysis. There's a lot to be said about that. I might even do some of that today. But I wanted to take a chance on a movie that has been getting high marks. And I very rarely do films that are out now. So I thought, yeah, I'm finally watching a movie that's out now. Why not do a review of it? Um, I have several things I can say about this film. I will say there will be no spoilers. Also, if you don't ever do this, I just would like to recommend this at the beginning of my videos. You should crank this up to the speed of 1.5. I'm a pretty slow talker. Sometimes I stop and think on the spot. And if you crank it up to 1.5, and you might think, I don't like doing that, it won't change much at all. It'll just make this go by much faster if you want that. And also, I've just started doing this with a lot of videos. I follow a lot of people that just talk like I am. And it's nice to be able to speed that up. So I want to recommend that. I also want to go ahead and get the review portion of this out of the way, and then I'll have a couple comments about it. I personally recommend the film. I think All Quiet on the Western Front is a good movie. I don't see very many Netflix films I'm even interested in watching, so to have a film actually be good was pretty surprising. Now, I will tell you, if you don't like war films, you're not going to like this movie. You're just not. If you do like war films, you're going to love this movie. If you just like movies, you'll like this movie. Does that make sense? I hope that makes sense. Look, the thing is, you get, like, with prison films, what's the point? The point is to escape prison, right? How are they going to get out of prison? There aren't a whole lot of other points. If you're going to go see a prison movie, that's what you're getting, right? War movies, what are you getting? I saw it as this. Imagine you go to a World War I museum and you get to tour through. And there's a Titanic museum that does this. And imagine they gave you a dog tag. And they said, okay, you go through the museum, you get to the end, and you present your dog tag and find out if your soldier lived or not, right? They do that again at a Titanic museum. It's not a dog tag, I think it's a ticket. That's kind of what this is. I can't help but feel like I'm in a really, really good museum seeing some of the events of World War I. It's a slice of what it was like to be there. Okay? And if you're curious about that, it's really good. Now I want to make another recommendation, and this recommendation is this. If you have not listened to Dan Carlin's podcast on World War I, it will enhance your enjoyment of this film. First off, it is so good, that podcast. It has affected our society. There's no doubt about it. And it has reinvigorated an interest in World War I, which is an interest in history, and that makes me happy. But it will give context to all of this. Context you really can't get from this film. And no film could deliver on that. And so if you listen to his podcast, and you should do that anyway, it's so good, but it will really help you enjoy, it will magnify the enjoyment of this film, for sure. There's a lot that could be said about this film. I want to talk about a brilliant idea that they kind of ruin, though. They spoil something really good. And what that is they visually, through several cues, show you that the trench warfare is not about taking territory. The whole point of the war was to take territory, but it wasn't going to happen. And there are multiple visual cues, down to the way tanks look. Tanks in World War I were about approaching trenches despite machine guns, right? I mean, there's more to it than that, but that's the basic idea. And they're there to attack trenches. And there are other visual cues. There's a picture that's used, okay? I won't say what it is, I don't want to spoil it, but there's a picture that's used to show you that the front's just not moving very much. And there are other visual cues as well, just to show you you're seeing the same trenches over and over and over. And there's some interesting dialogue where he says, we're gonna keep fighting for every centimeter. Good stuff, it really draws you in. it pays off for paying attention. But then they do something that, the whole point is, if the point of the war is to take territory and you take none, yet people are dying, what's the point? Right? Okay. The very end of the movie, right before the end credits, after the last scene and into the end credits, they explain the film. I'm not kidding. They actually explain what you just saw. If you don't have enough confidence that you have shown me what I need to see in your movie, why are you making this movie? I was very disappointed by that. I was just like, I don't need you to tell me what I just saw. I got it. I know what I just saw. So who are you explaining this to? The adults in your audience? I think it's a little bit insulting. Now, there might have been some people who watched this and didn't get it, but I'm going to tell you, if you needed to read that at the end to understand what you just saw, you probably were making out with your girlfriend or making out with your boyfriend the whole time. You weren't watching this movie. I just don't get that. I'm like, that's the point. Anyway, I don't understand filmmakers today. They do things that don't edify their audience. And they do things that, because they assume their audience just isn't smart enough to watch their movies, and it ends up making them look stupid, you know? I just don't. I had a supervisor at work that used to do this. He would tell you something you already knew because he wanted to tell you rather than you having the autonomy to actually know things. And he ended up I really love this guy, but he ended up kind of looking dumb sometimes, even though the guy's super intelligent, because he's telling everybody things they all already know because we're working there for years, you know? But anyway, so I had a dream one time that this is going to summarize this movie. This will be a short review, I think. And the dream was, it was such a vivid dream as a child. We were being invaded. My neighborhood was being invaded, and me and my friends were fighting. It was the Russians. We're fighting them. And I just remember at one point in the dream, I saw a giant crystal ball. That's what we were fighting for. And my friend's legs were hanging out of the crystal ball, and he had died. And I remember going, oh no, he's dead. And the war was over. It was the next day. And I was like, well, his brother was still alive. You know, I liked his brother too. And I'll go to his house and we'll play. And so I went and knocked on the door, and my friend was still alive. And I was like, oh wow, he didn't die. That's great. And then the Russians invaded again. And I was thinking, when does it end? And that's kind of what this movie's about. It's about this pointless waste. This pointless waste. Now, another complaint that I have, again, none of this is a knock on the movie, though. These things are just my observations. I'm not just trying to be negative. I do recommend the film. I think the movie's really good. I just noticed a couple things. And one of the things is they go through the trouble of showing you the waste of human life, okay? But then they show you the famous rail car where the Treaty of Versailles was signed. And they show you this French, I guess, general, and that he's just real bullheaded, and it's juxtaposition, right? It's saying, look at the waste in the war, in the battlefield. Look how bullheaded this guy is in this, rail car, eating clean food and everything, who gets to make decisions for everyone else. I just think it's manipulative. I don't think that's really great storytelling. I don't. I think that's sort of that Michael Moore approach. Hey, I'm going to juxtaposition these two things and make you feel really bad about it. I don't like it. I would have preferred them let me make my own decisions about how I feel, about how the leadership handled. In fact, you get to the end of the movie, they don't have to be heavy-handed about it. You understand that this is ridiculous. And what do I mean by that? Well, okay, so there's some Spielbergian timing. And what I mean by that is that Spielberg is the definition of Hollywood. So one thing I don't like about Spielberg is that he always has the timing on things is spectacularly odd. A guy has, like Saving Private Ryan, a guy has his helmet on, There's a bullet clings out the helmet. He takes it down. Someone says, "You got lucky." Then he gets shot in the head. That may have really happened, by the way, but it's just Spielberg tends to focus on those kind of things. It's kind of strange. And I don't know, man. It's just in this movie. I'm sorry. It's just in this movie, there's a lot of that. And that kind of, it's no big deal. It's entertaining, but it is a little bit like, oh, look at the timing on this. But I will say this. By the end of the movie, it makes you wonder, okay, is this what we're going to keep getting? And I'll tell you, the timing at the end, I don't want to spoil anything. I'll just say there's some strange timing at the end where things work out and it sort of magnifies how big of a waste it's all been. That's true, what happens at the end. And I'll just say, the idea is at the very, very end with just hours left. This is the end of the war. So this isn't a spoiler. You can learn this from history. The end of the war, you're in the last day of the war and they're still fighting. Like they're being told, push the line, even though they've never gained anything. And that is why I suggest listening to Dan Carlin's, or read, if you prefer to read Guns of August, but listen to Dan Carlin's podcast on this. One of the things I want to mention here real quick before I end this is two things, actually. I want to talk about the dog tags in this movie, and I want to talk about the worldview, the change of worldview, which I think is really important. So first, the dog tags. If you've ever seen another Spielberg film, by the way, because he has a interest in World War II. If you've ever seen Schindler's List, there's a scene where it's all in black and white except for one little girl who's wearing pink, okay? And she really stands out. And by the end of the movie, you see her body in a pile of other bodies, and she's just you see her pink dress, her pink coat in the pile of bodies. And the idea there is that this is one person who could have been special, but they end up dead just like everybody else. That idea is in this film. It's done with dog tags. You just see dog tags everywhere. And dog tags are meant to show you how wasted life is in this. And they do a really good job of that. I thought that was really well done. Again, among many things I'm not mentioning that are well done in this film. Not to mention the visuals and the acting. Not that I know a lot about, I don't keep track of a lot of acting. It could have been bad, I wouldn't have even noticed, but it was really good as far as I could tell. But the visuals are stunning. Sound was really good. Music was really good. Very appropriate, which I like because sometimes music is not appropriate in films like this. It was really, really good. And then finally, I want to talk about the shift of worldview. Dan Carlin, his podcast, mentioned that down to the uniforms, the ideas that preceded World War I were still there going into that war. And this is in Guns of August, where in Guns of August have focused more on the tactics, okay? Not that I know everything about Guns of August. I've never read it. I've only listened to reviews of it and have friends I've talked to about it. But the idea is that the tactics were outstriped so much by the technology. Technology advanced so much that the tactics hadn't kept up. Now, Dan Carlin talks about the worldview, and this is a little more interesting. The worldview Dan Carlin talks about is this. Sorry, I keep saying Dan Carlin. But the worldview leading up to the war, there's a name for this. I don't remember the name of it. It's been years since I listened to the podcast. I listened to it like the year after it came out, which was like 2015, 2016. The worldview at the time was this, that war was a glorious thing, that the meaning of man's life was to fight in war, that adventure for a man was anything that was dangerous. So war was actually preferable outcome in life. You wanted to go to war. It got you glory. And he talks about the uniforms, Dan Carlin, and how certain regiments had the same uniforms for 100 years. And in World War I, it was no different. They went in with these uniforms. And what happened? They didn't fight. They got shelled to death. They just got cannons off in the distance, shelling everybody to death, dropping down chemicals, and people just dying on the battlefield, never even seeing the enemy. And just the waste of life. It's really amazing. And there was a shift in worldview after World War I, that humanity no longer saw war this way. humanity started to see war as a waste of life. Very interesting. And this movie really does this well. At the very beginning, you see a group of friends, and they're what? They're excited to go to war. That's accurate. I'm sure they were excited to go to war. The war was something that you went and did, and you did it for glory. And they show you by the end, they're not excited at all. Really, obviously not excited by the end of it. And you see, they juxtapose it really well. Like, look at the main character at the beginning and look at him at the end. They show you his alteration. Very, very good. Highly recommend the film. If you don't like war, though, you should not watch this. It's not for people who don't like war movies. Also, if you're looking for something very, very different, you're going to get what you get with a war film with this. Okay? Also, the war scenes themselves, not as good as Saving Private Ryan. Not that good. Saving Private Ryan's war scenes are incredible. This isn't even trying to do that, though. This is trying to show you the loss of human life, and it does it well. Hope you watch this if you like movies. I think you'll really enjoy it.